Good morning. Today is the 16th of October. We're interviewing in Grassroots Television in Aspen, Colorado. Today we're interviewing Richard Sargent McCrudden, who was born in Boston, Massachusetts on the first day of November, 1922. I'm working with the Library of Congress Veterans History Project in association, and we are sponsored with the Aspen Elks, Grassroots Television, and the Aspen Historical Society. Good morning, Dick.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. And we're talking about the 10th Mountain Division today, but before we get going, your middle name is Sargent, and I was just wondering if there's any historical background to that family name.
Well, one of my distant ancestors is John Singer Sargent, who was probably one of the finest American painters ever. I didn't know him at all, but this was one of the ancestors. I know nothing about painting. It's far away from my life. I know nothing really about painting or art or any of those things. I've been in athletics all my life, and that's what I'm still doing, still into this.
Still doing that hunting and skiing?
Hunting and fishing, mountain climbing, skiing, and all of that sort of thing, outdoors.
Did you ever acquire any of his art, of Sargent's art?
I've got one painting at home that was done not by him, but by someone that took that painting and redid it, and then I ended up with it.
That's a keeper, Dick.
That's a keeper.
Well, you were raised up in New England and the outdoor life.
Yes.
And you attended prep school. Where did you go to prep school?
Yeah. Well, first, let me run back a little before then. I started skiing and climbing mountains when I was 4 years old. And my mother somehow knew something about skiing, and she started me skiing, and I can remember skiing with her. And my father lived in Germany for a number of years when he finished college here, and he went and was doing research in pharmacology at some of the university hospitals in Germany, and he spent the summers climbing mountains there. And when he came back, he started me climbing mountains here when I was 4 years old. And we had family friends in North Conway, New Hampshire, that owned a hotel there, a summer resort hotel. And even when I was small, I spent most of my weekends and vacations there, climbing the mountains in the summertime and started skiing in the wintertime and on the logging roads. And we had 2 ski runs at that time, one on Black Mountain and one on Doublehead. And we used to walk up those ski runs and ski down. This is way back in the late 20s and early 30s. And this is the way it all started until they put in the first lift in 1935, 36 in North Conway.
What kind of skis and bindings did you have on those first skis, Dick?
Well, the skis, I remember, were pretty decent, and the bindings were quite primitive. And I can't remember too much about them. They were wood skis made out of hickory. And they eventually had steel edges. And the best skis at the time came from the Scandinavian countries, and then the American countries, Northland, and some of the other companies started making skis in this country. So this is a long time ago. This is in the late 20s and early 30s.
So you have deep roots up in New England and followed on and started your schooling up there.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your prep school there?
Yeah, I went to a prep school called Kimball Union Academy, which is just south of Dartmouth College. And when I got there, I had done a little downhill and slalom racing. And the ski coach was a Dartmouth graduate in the same class with Dick Durrance, as a matter of fact. And he started me running cross country and jumping. And so eventually, within a short time, I was able to do the jumping cross country as well as downhill and slalom. And I skied for the school while I was there, which was 3-4 years. And I was captain of the ski team in my senior year. And then from there, I went on to Middlebury College. I skied for the Middlebury ski team when I was there, again doing 4 events.
Well, you got it Middlebury, and then that would be about 1943 or so.
That was I started Middlebury in 1941. And I stayed there for a year and a half. And then I knew when my draft number was going to come up, so I left after the first semester in the second year and went back to North Conway and told Hannes Schneider, my next-door neighbor, that I wanted to learn how to teach skiing. He said fine, and he'd take care of it, and he did. And then I went into the mountain troops, and after that, when I got out of the mountain troops, I changed my major and went back to University of New Hampshire. Graduated there in 1948. And I skied for the school, for the university when I was there too.
Also, you mentioned Hans Schneider. There's a film that's out, The Last Ridge, the uphill battles of the 10th Mountain Division, and in it, it shows Hans Schneider and Tony Matt, and shows Friedel Pfeiffer and Fred Island, familiar names. What was Hans Schneider's background? How did he get here to the United States, and you started teaching skiing for him?
He started, he was called the father of the Alberg technique, and this was in St. Anton in Austria, and he ran the ski school there. And then in the late 30s, he sent one of his top instructors to North Conway to run the ski school, and his name was Benner Rabitska. And Benner ran the school there for a little while. In the meantime, the war got going, and Schneider ended up in jail. Hitler put him in jail in Germany, and there was a man named Harvey Gibson who was born and raised in North Conway, who eventually ended up in New York City, president of a bank, and very, very successful in the banking business. And during the war, Harvey Gibson was head of the American Red Cross, and he was able to get Schneider out of jail in Germany and brought him over to this country. And when he came over to this country, he settled in North Conway, and he stayed there until he died. And as a matter of fact, his son, Herbert Schneider, lives in that same house that Hannes lived in when he came to this country. And I lived about next door to him. And so I, of course, knew him well. And in the meantime, right after the war, Schneider brought over a number of the Austrian ski instructors, and Tony Matt was one, Otto Scholl, and I can't remember all of them, but there were about 6 that he brought over at one time. Mm-hmm. And when I was living there, Otto Scholl did a lot of mountain climbing, and he taught me a lot about rock climbing, which was kind of interesting. But anyway, my father mostly got me started in the rock climbing because he had climbed so much in Europe when he was there. My father's a doctor and ended up practicing in Boston, but when he finished school, he spent a number of years in Germany doing research there. And so this is how I got started climbing in the mountains. He had me climbing all over the place. My mother got me, as I mentioned, started me skiing, and this is a long time ago.
You're still at it. You have been associated with some of the legends of skiing, one of them being Tony Matt, mm-hmm. and I understand he shooshed the head wall at Tuckerman's Ravine.
Yes, was the first person to do that.
Still a legend. Still a legend.
Still a legend, yeah. He was a very nice person, and he's, of course, an excellent skier and a very good teacher. And he stayed there for some time with the Schneider school. Then he was offered a job at Whitefish, Montana, running a ski school, and he went to Whitefish and ran a ski school there for a short time. I don't remember how long. And then eventually, I think he got out of skiing and somehow got connected, I think, with one of the Rockefellers and ended up in the golf business somehow, as I remember, in New York, but I'm not sure.
And he did serve in the 10th Mountain Division.
Yeah,
I saw it
he was
right
in
here.
the 10th Mountain, and some of the other Austrian ski instructors all ended up in the 10th Mountain.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting to the point where the military is maybe looking at all the young men like yourself that are vital and have some skills. And you wound up then in World War II, and can you tell your branch of service there, what unit you served with?
Yeah, when I went in the 10th Mountain, it was in the spring of 1943, and I started basic training, and I got part way through basic training, and then they knew I could teach rock climbing and skiing because of what I'd done before then, and so they sent a few of us up from Camp Hale, which is right near Vail, and they sent us a few of us from there to Mount Rainier in Washington to climb on ice, to learn how to climb on the glaciers. And I was sent up there before I'd finished basic training. And so I spent most of the summer on Mount Rainier climbing on the ice. And then I came back from Rainier, and it was getting close to the winter time, and I can remember they said, well, we've got to have some ski instructors. And so I can remember they told me to round up a bunch of these people that could ski well and teach them how to teach. And I did that, and in October, we used to go from Camp Hale, we go up to Ptarmigan Peak. Ptarmigan Peak is about halfway, but is very close to the top of Vail Pass. And I can remember there, and we had a little snow and some of those grassy slopes, and I started teaching these guys how to teach skiing up there. And then we got more snow, and then we couldn't get up there anymore. And then we had a small hill at one end of Camp Hale, and we went and started teaching, did the teaching there. And I had, I don't know, 3-4 dozen, I suppose, ski instructors. And then from there I went to Cooper Hill. Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like you're teaching basic skiing and not so much military drilling. Did you have were you an officer then, or?
No, they asked me if I wanted to go to officers training. I wanted no part of that, because anyone that went to go to the OCS they sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, and that was sea level, humidity, and heat. And that's far different from 9,200 feet, dry, cold weather. Too much of a change. And so, but what they did, they just said, well, they gave me a special uniform, and I lived in the officers' barracks up at Cooper Hill. That's where I spent most of my time running, and I ran the ski school for the 85th Regiment up there. And so that worked out fine until we got done teaching, and then maneuvers started.
Well, were you drafted, or did you enlist in the 10th Mountain?
Well, both. My draft number came up, and as soon as that came up, I had all the credentials to go in the mountain troops, so I went in and went right to Camp Hale.
Where were you living when you entered the service?
I was living in North Conway, New Hampshire.
North Conway.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
My home was in the suburbs of Boston, because my father practiced in Boston. Mm-hmm. But I didn't, too much city for me. We had a nice family, a nice home, but I prefer the mountains.
Mm-hmm. What were your first days like in the service when you first came in, from transitioning from civilian life to military life?
Well, it was all just military, and I can't remember too much about it. It was just a bunch of basic training things is what it was, and we were just busy doing all kinds of different things. Did a lot of shooting, one thing, and a lot of hiking, and that was fine.
Well, that's what the military's looking for, is young men that are outdoors and strong and can shoot a rifle. Did you do any hunting when you were younger before you went in the military?
Yeah, I'd done some hunting then. I'd already done some shooting, and I was able to shoot very well when I got in the service, and my eyes were extremely good. And I can remember, as a matter of fact, on the rifle range when we were shooting when they had the combat course, where they'd have these targets, these wooden people jumping out from behind the buildings, and there were people down below with the pulleys. I had a nice time cutting the ropes.
Yeah, in the butts there on the shooting range. Yeah. I've experienced that in the Marine Corps with Maggie's drawers, and a lot of things go on down there. The troops.
Yeah, I could shoot well enough that I could cut the ropes that were working the targets. Mm-hmm. I kind of did that. It was sort of fun. Mm-hmm. People they didn't like it, but they didn't know who was doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, after you got out of the military, did you continue to hunt?
Yeah. Did a lot of hunting and guiding then. As soon as I got out. When I was in college, then I went right back to college when I got out. But in the fall, I spent weekends hunting when I was in college, and in North Conway, hunting deer and bear.
Did you ever keep track of any of the animals you shot? Number?
No. Elk, yes.
How about elk? How many elk?
A few dozen.
A few dozen? Okay. Let's say that. Now, you were an instructor. Do you remember any of the instructors that taught you to get you going? Were there any tough sergeants or anything like that you remember?
No. All of the sergeants and people like that I was associated with, were not skiers. When we were at Camp Hale, most of the people, the soldiers, all of the new people in there were mostly either college graduates or in college at the time. And so they had a very, very high number of educated people. But then the non-commissioned officers came in. They brought them in mostly, I think, from Hawaii, and they knew the military, but they were not very well educated. And so there was quite a difference between the personnel at that time. So. And the commissioned officers were mostly mostly educated people. Mm-hmm. But so it was kind of a strange mixture, actually.
Yeah. And if they had any athletic skills, they would probably be able to pick the skiing up with hard work.
Yeah. There's a guy that slept next to me one time. His name was Bob Pastor. Bob Pastor was a heavyweight boxing, and as a matter of fact, he beat Joe Louis at one time in one match. He was that good a boxer, and he ended up there. And he was a big, strong guy, but that physique wasn't fit for the high altitude climbing, and so he had to leave. Mm-hmm. He went into the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. So you stayed. Did you stay then at Camp Hale and continue training the troops?
I stayed there. I went through maneuvers, and I worked as doing reconnaissance work in the maneuvers. I was kind of a James Bond person during the maneuvers, late winter, and I was working alone. Worked for all through the maneuvers. I worked all by myself, climbing around in the mountains between Tennessee Pass and Holy Cross Peak. And then again, I was camped. From there, we went up the top of Vail. I was camped up on the top of Vail Pass, and I spent every night running around the hills between Vail and Camp Hale, actually. And I did that all during the maneuvers while I was working alone. They had three of us that were working alone on the enemy detail. And that's what I was doing during the maneuvers. And I did that until the maneuvers finished in the springtime. And then I was a little underweight by that time. I'd lost an awful lot of weight. And so then they sent the whole camp to Camp Swift in Texas before they went overseas, and they left me there because I could teach skiing and rock climbing and ice climbing. And I stayed there for a while, not doing too much, and then finally I was discharged.
Well, it seems strange that they would train the troops for the mountains and then send them down the desert in Texas. Now that's happens in the military, but
That's right.
did you talk to any of them about what Swift was like down there?
Oh, yeah. Hot.
Hot? Not your kind of place.
Hot.
So you stayed in the mountains.
But then when they went to Europe, then they went to Italy, and then from it they went into the mountains in the northern part of Italy after that.
Yeah, up and got deployed there and in Apennines and Riva Ridge and Belvedere, went up the Po Valley, and so that was good. Did you keep in touch with your family during all this training, as far as letters, phone calls?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would correspond with my mother and my father during this training, and I think my mother kept some of those letters. I'm not sure. I think I've got some of the letters that I wrote to her. I know that right now, in the middle of reading a stack of probably 1,000 pages that my father wrote about his life, and I'm in the middle of that right now. And so I haven't got to a lot of the other things that I've still got at home.
Do you remember if there was censorship in the letters, or was that overseas in the combat areas?
No censorship.
It was straight out.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Well, you're burning all these calories up there, Dick. What was the food like that you had to keep you going?
Oh, the food in the meals were actually pretty good. A lot of calories, 6,000 a day, as I remember.
Oh.
And but during the maneuvers, that was a different ball game. And that's why I lost so much weight, is because it was difficult eating. Usually, when I had a hot meal, which was my dinner at night, but when the rest of the people were having breakfast, I just came back from being out all night long. I'd come back during the maneuvers, and they were having breakfast, and I can remember it was very, very cold, 30 below zero, night after night after night during those maneuvers late in the winter. And I can remember, I had a lean-to that I was living in that I'd built out of pine boughs because the tents were so bad. And I can remember looking at that chow line and seeing these people fall over that from hypothermia. At that time they called it cold soak, and actually it was hypothermia. Then they'd take them and get them into the hospital, and this would happen. And then I'd go have my dinner, and then but it was actually breakfast time, and that's a hot meal. And then other than that, a lot of the times I was eating sea rations, and they were frozen. And I lost quite a bit. Of course, I was running around all night long on a pair of skis up in those hills and not eating too well, and that's why I lost so much weight.
Lean and mean. Well, when you got out of the hills, you're probably so tired, and for entertainment, you just sit around the barracks on the weekends and play cards, or was there anything to do or
Well, on
opportunity
the
to go
weekends,
anywhere?
in the wintertime, on the weekends when it worked, I'd come to Aspen and ski. Two other guys and I came over together, and we'd walk up Aspen Mountain and stay at the Hotel Jerome for next to nothing, and walk up Aspen Mountain, ski down. So that's what we.
Can you remember what next to nothing would be? How much would it be to stay all night?
No, I can't remember
Can't
exactly,
remember
but we'd have maybe $1.50 for a room at night, and maybe $1 more or less for dinner at night. And But we, of course, at that time, we were pretty strong. And
Did you meet any locals that were living here in Aspen?
yeah, a few. But I can't remember them now. But I did. I know I met a few locals here. But that was, that was a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
1944.
Well, did you have any humorous experiences or any pranks played on you, or did you play any pranks on the troops?
I stole the general's plans one time.
Stole the general's plans. How did that happen? How'd that happen?
Well, it was when I was doing the reconnaissance work. I ran into the general's tent when I was wandering around, and at that particular night, another guy was working with me, and we decided to go out together. And the first thing we tried to do, we wanted to steal a weasel. Weasel was the primitive snowcats, but we found one, but we didn't know how to start it or run it, so and then we decided it was time to leave. And so on the way after we left from where that weasel was, we went by the general's tent, and I got thinking, maybe we could do something here. So we worked it out. I stole the general's plans and went back and turned them into the major I was working for, and that's about the only real prank, I guess.
Well, that's really, and they call them basically war games, what you were doing.
Yes.
And all's fair in love and war.
Yes.
That's right.
That's what we thought at the time, but we didn't know if it really was the right thing to do or not, but we did it.
But you made a point, and probably whoever was in charge of security of the general's tent heard about it, and then they had to increase the security on the tent.
He was the first lieutenant. They're supposed to be the guard. I remember that. He got distracted long enough for me to do what I did.
Well, that's what happens in war, Yeah. That's the enemy, and that's part of the training.
That's part of it.
Do you have any other special memories of your days at Camp Hale and the 10th Mountain? Any, like Thanksgiving, did they have any special meals, or New Year's, or anything that was really special?
No, not really. It was not too much, because we were pretty busy all of the time, moving and going, and we did an awful lot of hiking, and that was fine. That hiking was good, and of course we were all pretty strong from all of that, and so. But on the weekends, we would come to Glenwood off and on the weekends, and go to Denver once in a great while. Went to Denver once or twice maybe, Denver was a small town at that time. Glenwood was a nice town, still is. But in the winter, we really liked to come to Aspen. I did ski at Winter Park. I remember we went over there a couple of times to ski. And Winter Park was in operation at that time. And we stayed at Idaho Springs when we went to Winter Park, but mostly we came here to ski. And afterwards, after the war, I did an awful lot of hunting here. But at that time, there was not much game. At the time we were at Camp Hale, not many deer, not many elk. And it all changed, It's all changed from those years, and as far as the game goes.
Well, you'll be 85 years old here on a few days.
Yes.
And I think that probably all this rugged training has carried you all the way through. I see you up at Buttermilk with your skis, and you're out there without a hat on, skiing down Tyhack there. And also, I noticed you had longer skis than these modern people have. What's the length of your skis you're still on, Dick?
Well, I'm on the shortest ski right now I ever had is 203 centimeters.
Yeah, I used to ski with you at 203s. You were at 203s, and I was on 160s, yeah.
But I skied for years in 215, 220, 225.
Downhill skis, yeah.
But they got shorter and shorter, and the last pair I got were 203, and they just work fine, and so I haven't changed. I'm not that.
Why change?
I'm not that fussy about them anymore, and as far as the wearing the hat and the cold doesn't seem to bother me. I just don't like hats, and I really wouldn't even bother to wear a pair of gloves and afraid I might fall down or something and hurt my hands, so I wear them, but cold doesn't seem to bother.
Yeah.
When I was at Camp Hale, I was fortunate that I did not have any problem with frostbite or cold. And when I was there, I had my own sweaters, my own socks, and my own mittens and gloves, and not the Army issue. And this is one way that I survived all of that cold weather, was good wool. The ski parkas were pretty good, but they were not that warm. The sleeping bags were very good. The tents were worthless.
They sweat on the inside, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were
So
white.
that's why I always would build a lean-to when I was out, camped out. Forget about the tent. And but now I ski. Yeah, I use a pretty long ski now, and when I ski now, I just ski for the fresh air and the enjoy and the exercise, and no more racing or anything like that. And have a nice lunch.
Well, you're an inspiration to my students. I teach kids 6 to 11. You know, we come over and we always visit, and they say, wow, when I tell them about your background, and they say maybe we'll be able to ski when we're as old as Mr. McCrudden, you know.
Yeah, well, who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, can you recall when your time in the service ended from Camp Hale, and you were discharged? What did you do then?
Went back to college.
Did you have the GI Bill? Did you use the GI Bill?
Had a GI Bill, but I worked too. Even though I had it, I used to work in the weekends, and sometimes I worked. A friend of mine lived in the town where the college was, and his family owned an apple orchard, and I used to go on the weekend every now and then help them pick apples in the fall, and then I used to go to North Conway in the fall. And we had a farm. The hotel owned a big farm up there, and I used to work in the farm during the fall. And then did some hunting too when I was up there. Hunting just deer and bear. So,
What did you study in college? What college was that you went to?
well, when I went to Middlebury, my major was geology. Mm-hmm. When I got out of the Army, I decided I wanted to study business, and they had no business courses at Middlebury, really. So then I went to University of New Hampshire and got a degree in business administration there. Mm-hmm. And I guess that was probably beneficial for the work that I did here for the ski company, because I did most of my work had to do with accounting, a lot of accounting and work with numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what my job was with the ski school here in Aspen.
Mm-hmm. Well, what year did you come to Aspen, and why did you come to Aspen?
When I came here the first time in 1948 and went to work as a bartender, I stayed for a little while, and then I wasn't feeling very well. And nobody could figure out what was wrong, and so I went back to Boston, and I saw my father, and he and another doctor decided I had appendicitis, but such a mild case that I had very few symptoms. And so finally they decided to do an exploratory, and they found, yes, I had an appendicitis, but it was so mild I was just a little bit sick. Well, they took it out, and that was the end of that. But anyway, then when I came back again, the first thing I did was called Siggy Engel in Sun Valley, who I knew. He was head of the ski school. I asked him if I could have a job teaching there, if I came out, and he said, yeah, sure. And so I packed up my old station wagon and headed back to west. And at that time, as I remember, Aspen opened about Thanksgiving, and Sun Valley, for some reason, didn't open until about a week before Christmas. So I thought I'd stop in Aspen and ski a little while. Mm-hmm. And so I got to Aspen, and that year at Thanksgiving, they had an awful lot of snow. And so I went over to the bottom of Aspen Mountain and to get a lift ticket, go ski, and this guy came up to me. His name was Earl Eaton, and he said, I understand you know the ski business. Can you go to work for us? And I said, well, no, I got to be in Sun Valley in a couple of weeks. He said, can you work a couple of weeks for us? And I said, yeah, sure. And I got on the lift. I was on the payroll. First day. And I worked on ski patrol for Earl Eaton for 2-3 years, 4 years maybe, on Aspen Mountain, and then went back. I never did go to Sun Valley. I enjoyed it. They had a lot of snow here. Skiing was good.
Why not?
Why not? Just stayed. And then eventually I went back to teaching skiing, worked for Friedel and Fred, and worked for them until they left.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you got here in that era, in the late 40s and early 50s, the other 10th Mountain people were starting to show up here, like Friedel Pfeiffer and,
mm-hmm.
and Fred Island and Fritz Benedict.
Yeah, quite a few of them that came here directly out of the Army, and there were a few here, like I said, like Fritz Benedict was one, and Peter Seibert and a few others. And I think Friedel at the time went to Sun Valley, and he had the ski school at Sun Valley. He bounced back and forth between Sun Valley and Aspen, running both schools, as I remember. But Fred Island was here as a partner with Friedel, but he stayed here, I think, most of the time. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, when I went back to teaching, Fred and Friedel were both head of the ski school. Mm-hmm. And they stayed until Friedel and Outfisters started Buttermilk, and then eventually I ended up running a supervisor ski school at Buttermilk and Aspen Mountain both at the same time, and that's when after the ski company had bought it. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I ended up assistant director in the ski school, which included Aspen Mountain, Buttermilk, and Snowmass. And then in the very final end of it, I was administrative director of all 3 ski schools, and then I spent the last 5 years doing consulting work for the ski company for a total of 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Then along the way, the 10th Mountain Division was going to other areas and either starting new ones, like Pete Seibert went over to Vail, yeah, and started Vail, and all over the United States, the 10th Mountain Division contributed to the growth of the ski industry. Yeah. After the war.
Yeah, they had people from the 10th Mountain Division who were here, and Steamboat Springs, Vail, Sun Valley, all of them, most of the ski areas ended up with a few people from the 10th. Mm-hmm. And of course there are not too many left anymore. You know, we're all getting kind of old. Mm-hmm. And there's a few left here and there, but not very many anymore. Oh,
we enjoyed meeting all of them during our interviews. Do you think that the military discipline helped the founders of these ski areas, and for you in particular, you're rugged and independent and made decisions that, do you feel that the military helped you in later years in your profession?
No, not really too much. I think the military helped in as far as the training at Camp Hale we were involved in. I think that did help some, because as far as I was concerned, I was running a ski school there at Cooper Hill, as a matter of fact, and so that was. But on the philosophy is my philosophy was a little different. My philosophy was in running a ski school here was people have got to have a good time and be happy. That's the name of the game. And I can remember telling ski instructors and supervisors here, that I said, keep these people happy, give them a good time. If they have such a good time, they come back tomorrow, you've done a great job. If you happen to teach them some skiing along with that a philosophy, all well and good. Mm-hmm. Make them happy, and this is what skiing is all about. Why do so many people ski? I've thought of this so many times and always come up with the same answer. The big majority of people that ski, people that work in business or some such thing in a big city, they come here and they go up and they ski. They're the boss. They're by themselves. They ski and they're independent, 100% independent on how they ski and where they ski. Totally different from what they've been doing. And I think this is one of the main reasons that skiing has grown so rapidly. And as far as the teaching goes, when people all want to ski a little better, and so, they go to school, learn how to ski. But I think the philosophy is they're independent and they're happy. And I think this is one of the main reasons this thing has grown so big. Hard to say.
Well, you certainly, presented the spirit of Aspen in the days of in the 50s, and you probably knew some of the town characters around here. Can you remember any of them?
Oh, yeah, I remember a few. There aren't very many left anymore. But like a guy named Martin Mishmash, old miner character, and of course the Lindsay brothers, they're still here.
They have been interviewed on this program.
Yeah, and they're still here. And of course Freddie Fisher is one of the biggest characters, and Freddie was a good friend of mine.
I was here in Aspen. I'd come back from Vietnam, and I met him just before he died. And I have a book called Fisher the Fixer. And did you ever see him or hear about him, how he got his parts and what he wrote letters to the editor?
Yeah, of course, Freddie was he was a clarinet player, and he was a good clarinet player, and he had a big band there for a long time. And then basically, I think the reason he quit, I think he got mad at the government because of the income tax, and he ended up in Aspen and didn't want to pay any taxes or anything like that. I can remember when he had a shop downtown here, and he hooked onto the town electric system, so he didn't have to pay any electric bills. And so he had free electricity. He was quite clever mechanically. He had lots of little things that he did, as well as he was a good musician, he was a character, and he was a comic. I spent, about 6 of us went elk hunting one time up above Lanedo, and we found an old cabin up there, and Freddie came along with us, and he fixed that place up so it was very comfortable. Did all of the little odds and ends and fixed the windows and the heat and everything, and we had 2 of the best chefs in Aspen along in that little trip, so we ate well and had a great time. And Freddie was there, and Earl Eaton was there, and another guy named Earl Voss, and Earl Eaton, we call him Eaton Earl, and Earl Moss was drinking Earl, and just a bunch of characters like that. Freddie was along with us. Freddie didn't really want to shoot any elk. He would like to go out and shoot squirrels.
Shoot squirrels.
We were up there elk hunting, but he'd go shoot 2 or 3 squirrels every day just for the fun of it.
Who was one of the other chefs you had with you up there?
Werner Fisher and Nino Herzig. Nino Herzig had the Golden Horn. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, and of course Werner had the Red Onion.
Yeah, Werner had the Red
Onion.
And
I've been talking to some of the second generation 10th Mountain that live here: Peter Green, Charlie Patterson, Werner Kuster, Pietro Danelli, and they all got drafted. Werner, I think, to get his citizenship, went into the Army and did his thing, and then
That's
came
correct.
back out as a citizen.
Yeah,
from what I've been told.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And Fritz Benedict told me that Freddie used to spend a lot of time out at the dump getting parts for his contraption.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw photos of the band. It was called Schnickelfritz Band, a German band, and
Yeah.
they were all over the United States,
That's right.
touring and everything.
But he played here. He was a good clarinet player.
Mm-hmm.
He played with Walt Smith and Bert Dollander, and so
Well, along the way, you must have you did get married. What year would that be? You and Connie got married.
we got married in 1960, 40 years ago.
40 years ago.
Yeah, 1967.
Yeah, I've been up to your home there, and beautiful home, and she's interior designer. Is that
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah, when she was in high school, she was a fashion model, and that was the work she did first. She was a fashion model for a number of years. From the time she finished, well, I guess she started in high school, I think, and then she ended up, when she finished modeling, she ended up doing interior design work, and she did many, many houses and condominiums in Snowmass and Aspen, very successful, and and of course when we built this last house, and we built a house our first house we built in so as soon as we got married, we built a house on the golf course in Aspen. We kind of designed that and built it, and then eventually when we moved to Carbondale, we had a lot of time to draw the plans and design the house in Carbondale, and so we just work on them every once in a while for a few days, for one evening, then forget about it for a few days and do it again. And finally, when we built that house, it was 12 years ago, we had the plans drawn and the house all designed, and we gave them to an architect that we found to do all of the structural. He did all the structural and did the whole everything from that point of view. Never changed anything that we designed in the house, and it came out exactly the way we had planned it. And it's and we have more land there, which was a lot what we really wanted. We have a few acres there instead of a small lot in Aspen.
Well, I've been up there on Wooden Deer Road. That's kind of appropriate for your hunting. You have a beautiful panoramic view of Mount Sopris, and
Yes.
you're waiting for the elk to come down and start browsing in your yard.
Yeah, they'll be there pretty soon. Sometimes we wake up in the morning, they're right out. They're looking right at us through the bedroom window. They're that close to the house, and that happens. On the wintertime, it's almost every other day there are elk there. Well, more than that. Sometimes every day they're there. Elk are there, and so it's good company.
Do you attend or keep in touch with the 10th Mountain veterans?
No, I get a publication about once every 2 or 3 months that they put out, but I don't. And I've been to a couple of the reunions up at Tennessee Pass. But and the last one I think was in Denver, the last big one. But I've got to the last one I went to. I was a little disappointed because like I've mentioned before, there are very few of us left. A lot of them are gone now, and they've got a lot of descendants and children and grandchildren from the 10th Mountain veterans, and they are going to these reunions now, and I guess that's okay, but it's just too many people for me.
Well, it's really important to carry on the traditions of the 10th Mountain. They're an active duty organization. I just talked to them at Fort Drum last week. They're in Afghanistan, and the descendants are the ones that are carrying into the future the traditions. And so we have one of them here, Karen Woodard. Her father was in the 10th Mountain in the artillery, and she and many others are carrying the traditions forward and keeping the spirit going. And along those lines, this PBS movie, The Last Ridge, we're going to show it on the 27th of November at the Wheeler Opera House as a fundraiser for this project to interview the veterans. We have interviewed a number of 10th Mountain, Gino Hollander and Ralph Ball and John Tripp and Frank Delensick and yourself, of course. So we're doing the best we can to record these stories. And so I'd like to invite you to, if you can, come to our, it's the Roaring Fork Valley Veterans History Project on the 27th of November at the Opera House. And we're looking to get a full house out there.
Well, I can make it okay, as long as the highway's all right. I don't like to drive on the bad weather or the bad highway.
Sure.
And it's like when I ski in the wintertime, if the weather's bad, I stay home.
Well, that's the wise way to do it.
Because I don't get paid to ski in the bad weather anymore.
Oh, you used to get paid to do that. I still get paid to ski in the bad weather.
I don't. I get paid to ski in the good weather.
Yeah, but I look forward to having lunch with you up there at the Cliff House.
Oh, that's fine.
In closing, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview, Dick?
Oh, I don't know. There are a lot of little things, I suppose, that there are a lot of, since I've lived here, I've ended up doing a tremendous amount of hunting and camping and backpacking and fishing all over the Wind River Range in Wyoming, and quite a bit of salmon fishing in Alaska. And the last trip in Alaska, I was in a plane crash. The plane was totaled. I'm still here. Ended up with cuts and bruises. And I've been through quite a lot of things like that. A lot of interesting things, that I've run into in the mountains and during the hunting and fishing. And I can remember one time when I shot a nice elk, and when I shot that elk between the eyes, his eyes were about 12 inches from the end of my rifle barrel.
Oh my gosh.
That close.
That close, Dick.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of those things happened. I can remember one time when I was camped at Avalanche Lake, up on the other side of Capitol Peak, fishing up there in the middle of August, no people because it was a difficult place to get to at that time. And I was catching some fish at the lower end of the lake, and there were two friends of mine with me. 3 people came back on Outward Bound, and they were going through there, and they stopped to camp there that night. And they sat down about 6 or 8 feet from me and watched me fishing. And they started talking back and forth together. And I heard one of them mention North Conway.
Oh.
And so I looked at this, and then I started listening. And finally, I looked at this one guy who I didn't know or anything. And I said, "How's your Uncle Jim?" And he looked at me never said a word, just looked at me with the most surprised look on his face. And never said, just looked at. He was wondering, how does this guy know my Uncle Jim? And then I looked at him again and I said, "How's your father, Bernard?"
Oh my gosh.
And then he just shook his head. He couldn't understand this. And I said, "How's your grandmother, Lil?" I said, "How do you know my whole family? I never saw you in my life before."
Oh my gosh.
From what he said, I kind of figured out who he was.
Yeah, yeah.
And funny, these strange things will happen like that sometimes.
Well, I think it speaks of this valley, that the people it attracts. There's a saying that you don't have to go to the world will come to Aspen, because we live in a beautiful place, and that's the way it is.
That's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being with us, Dick, and I look forward to making a few runs with you at Buttermilk this year.
Yeah, I plan to ski. As long as my legs and feet hold up, we'll see. Who knows?
We'll be there. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Cut. Well, that was great.